and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. If you were looking for and couldn't find our podcast last week, we had a technical problem with it. By now, it should be posted along with this week's podcast.
All right. Thank you, Bill Bowman, for doing that. We start off with in the news with a victory in Australia, where the Senate voted overwhelmingly for marriage equality.
That puts us halfway there.
What about our Senate?
We'll get to that.
Well, that's
in fact, we'll get to that with the next headline, which concerns the Republican tax bill that will impoverish tens of millions of Americans, further enrich the wealthy, and, of course, screw the rest of us for allowing discrimination by churches, political money, all hurtling towards passage. We hope not.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Another federal judge has put a stop to President Trump's ban on transgender people in the military, while the Republican Senate keeps confirming Trump judges who would rule the other way.
Canada this week, in the person of Prime Minister Trudeau, very moving apology to LGBTQ and Two-Spirit people for centuries of discrimination, and came up with a $100 million settlement for those whose lives were upended specifically by the anti-sodomy laws.
In Egypt and Turkey, the anti-LGBT crackdowns are accelerating, while in Chile, 100,000 marched for marriage equality. 100,000.
Andy has been doing his research, and he's gone to the Metropolitan Museum, which has turned gay for the winter.
And I'm going to review the gay-themed play Harry Clark with Billy Crudup off-Broadway.
And we will give you Chris Cooper's review of the hot new film that just won Best Film at the Gotham Awards in New York, Call Me By Your Name. Somewhat controversial.
Quite a debate going on about it.
Intergenerational, although they're only
it's not about that.
7 years apart.
It's about how gay it is or not, and all this stuff, and why are gay men so enamored of it when it's this and that. Well, we haven't seen it yet.
But we'll get to it.
And I want to start off by thanking the President of the United States. I rarely do this, but after Matt Lauer was, gotten rid of this week, it made me think that I think the main reason this is happening is because of Trump. People are so angry at his misdeeds, and they can't get at him, and angry that this predator was elected president of the United States, that it has made people angry enough and resolved enough. I'm going to do something about what I can do something about. And these brave women and some men are coming forward, and they are draining the swamp. And the corporate world, the religious world, the entertainment world, the news business, and it's all to the good. So it's, the world's going to end, and, or the country's going down, but that at least is being taken care of.
Well, I would partially agree with you.
Okay. All right, should we?
We might as well start in Australia.
Yeah.
You put that at the top of the headline, so let's do that.
It's big news. The vote in the Senate there was 43-12 for same-sex marriage, and this is after the postal advisory referendum. And the really good news is that the senators rejected overwhelmingly these religious freedom amendments, which would have watered down the bill.
They accepted some that are pretty standard, clergy doesn't have to do it. But they also said that civil clerks can assert a religious objection, and they don't have to perform the marriages either. That's farther than we want to go here. Right. But it's really minor compared to the offerings that were rejected, about really lots more religious exemptions.
And it has to go to their House of Representatives now, and that's going to be in December sometime.
And now there's a little tragic, footnote to this. In New York City, the second secretary of the Australian mission Julian Simpson, 30 years old. Excuse me, I'm not sick.
Have a drink. Well, let's talk about what happened. He was at a party in New York, and they had lit up the Empire State Building in rainbow colors because of this. Apparently.
Well, yes, it was when they got the results of the postal survey. And so he was at a party, and he got in a disagreement with another guy at the party over how he treated his wife or something. And he ends up...
He was whirling the wife around in a celebratory dance.
Yeah, and she said she was scared by that out on the balcony. So then her husband got mad. So then this guy...
Then he said, let's have a trust exercise.
And he ends up going off the balcony.
5 stories to his death.
Dead.
Awful.
Second Secretary of the Australian mission. So that is a very sad footnote to this. But we are heading for marriage equality in Australia momentarily.
And we are headed for one of the worst disasters in American history with this, what they call a tax bill, which is really a big tax cut to the rich bill. You've heard all this, but it's obviously not setting in. You know, I remember when, President Obama proposed something as simple as health care reform and did the Americans Affordable Care Act. The Tea Party was organized around that, and they all held up signs saying, I'm not going to let you kill my mother or my grandmother. I'm not going to let you kill them because it's going to hurt Medicare.
The death panels.
And also they felt it was going to affect Medicare. This thing is going to slash Medicare, what we depend upon as old people,
and Social Security,
dramatically, and Medicaid, and basically everything that you rely on for basic middle class, kind of amenities that we do have some access to in this country. Because in addition, they're giving the money away to the rich people, but they have to cut it from elsewhere, and they're going to take it from you. So you might get a $1,000 tax cut. You're going to pay $5,000 more for services, or maybe more than that. I mean, people should be out there with the pitchforks on this, and they're not.
Well, some are, and Rise and Resist from New York and other activists were at the Senate hearing this week, got themselves arrested, got themselves all over TV. Our old pal Mark Milano.
Tim Lunsford.
Yeah, on the Rachel Maddow show, Big as Life.
Even Larry Summers is speaking out strongly against this, the former Treasury Secretary in a Democratic administration. Not the nicest guy, but he says this is a disaster.
You can't turn on MSNBC, certainly, without seeing hour after hour after hour of analysis calling this the worst idea in the world.
And the polling has it at like under 30%. So people don't want this, but the donors want it desperately. And they're the Koch brothers and everybody else are saying to these senators, we're turning the spigot off if you don't give us our money.
And that's how craven they are.
And then they're going to own the government more than they even do now. Of course, it also includes the repeal of the Johnson Amendment, which means that the donors are going to be able to give money, tax exempt, to churches who will then be able to use it for political purposes to further oppress us.
Well, and at the direction of the donors, who will tell them what candidates to support and how. And it's just an across-the-board disaster. So we need 3 Republican senators to vote against this.
So if you live in Maine or Arizona or Tennessee or Alaska or a couple of these other places where some of these people might be willing to vote against it, Wisconsin, etc., if you have a Republican senator.
But these fringe senators who might vote against it are all being bought off with provisions that answer their particular objection. That
in many cases make it even worse.
Exactly.
More giveaways to rich people, including themselves.
And the religious discrimination amendment, which was not in the Senate bill, but has now been promised to be included in the Senate bill, because somebody wants that who's threatening to vote against the bill.
Well, I mean, look, the people in this country, and we can move on, I mean, the people in this country who are getting what they want are fundamentalist evangelical Christians, because they're getting that kind of thing, although it'll hurt them in terms of many parts of their daily lives and the way they live their lives. But they're also getting all the judges that they want. And it's kind of unbelievable, the kind of judges that are being confirmed at this point. I mean, really. you know, because there was one Trump appointee, we can talk about him later, who finally was stopped because of racism, past racist remarks. I mean, they actually can stop a few of these people. But anti-gay bigotry and what these people traded in does not stop them from being confirmed as a federal judge. It is not enough of a concern to any Republican senator. I mean, I think...
Well, we got our first Republican senator this week voting against one of these monsters.
But not for that reason.
The judge confirmed is Gregory Katsas, confirmed to the D.C. Court of Appeals.
So John Kennedy of Louisiana, the senator, Republican senator, voted against him. And Joe Manchin supported him, though, the guy from West Virginia. I don't know why. But so, you know, this guy wrote the memo for the president barring transgender people in the military. And his anti-gay stuff goes on and on. He wrote the thing getting rid of the guidance for transgender students in the schools. He wrote these things within the White House.
He also has worked to suppress voting. He's a bad guy completely.
It just sounds like the Republican platform, though, these days.
Well, the good news this week, though, has to do with Trump's attempt to keep trans people out of the military. We had the decision a couple of weeks ago of the judge who issued a preliminary injunction against Trump's proposed new policy. This week, we had another court decision in Maryland, the Maryland case. There are 4 cases, I think.
That was Judge Marvin Garbus, the one who said that... stated that it cannot possibly constitute a legitimate government interest to do what you're proposing to do to transgender people.
He also issued a preliminary injunction against the military trans ban. He called the proposed ban capricious, arbitrary, and he said it was based on a capricious, arbitrary, and unqualified treat, which does not trump methodical and systematic review by the military stakeholders, because he cited this lengthy review the military had done when Obama was still around that ended up supporting service by trans people in the military. And Trump puts out this one tweet and suddenly tries to change everything.
So the point, Mr. President, is that you can't do anything you want except start a war with North Korea.
This judge also said that trans status should be regarded as sex discrimination and as a category requiring extra scrutiny before you allow discrimination, and that there was no rational basis for the ban. He called it so arbitrary it shocks the conscience. Now, then there was another decision after that by the judge in D.C. District Court.
Colleen Kolar-Kotley.
She was the one who issued the first preliminary injunction, and the Trump administration had been trying to sort of manipulate that and say, well, really, can't we do such and such? And so she clarified her original preliminary injunction in another decision and said, no. I meant what I said.
She said you must move forward with previously developed plans to allow qualified trans people to enlist or commission into the military starting January 1st, 2018.
But here's what annoys me about
That's an order.
Yes, we'll see how they treat that. I'm sure they'll appeal all of this and hope to get a decision favoring them from their Supreme Court. The news reporting, first of all, very good. A lot of news.
It's not their Supreme Court yet. They got to get rid of Kennedy first. I mean, he's in the middle.
Well, Kennedy hasn't done trans stuff yet.
He's in the middle.
Yes, but he's done LGB stuff very well. Trans stuff.
We want to add a T to your ribbons on your robes.
So very good news reporting on all of this. Right at the top of the news that these court decisions have come down, that Trump has been beaten back by the courts on the trans military ban. But they all cite the tweet as this, strange thing that came out of nowhere. And nobody is reporting, to go back to our first story, that this was done to satisfy the right-wing evangelicals who were pissed off that they didn't get what they wanted in an appropriations bill to ban coverage of trans medical care in the military, and that Trump was trying to satisfy them so he could get the military appropriation bill passed, which included funding for his wall.
Then why did he go all the way and not just give them that little bit that they wanted?
Because he's a moron.
Oh.
And he thought,
have you noticed?
If a little is good, then all of it must be great. Because this makes sense to me because, you know, why not the conventional wisdom that trans people are inappropriate for the military? You certainly didn't expect him to read the report, did you?
No.
But I'm disappointed that the news media have not caught on to the fact that this whole thing is based on satisfying the evangelical right wing and Tony Perkins and the right wing members of Congress, rather than just something Trump dreamed up in the middle of the night.
Right. Well, this time next week, we will be glued to SCOTUS blog and awaiting the reports from the Supreme Court, where they are hearing the Masterpiece Cake Shop Masterpiece Cake Shop case. This is the one that is going to determine whether people who claim a religious feeling who want to discriminate against other people of all kinds, not
business
just gay
owners,
people,
not priests, business owners
have the right to override the local anti-discrimination laws. And
Colorado has a state law forbidding discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity.
And again, it started out as like my religious freedom, but they're really focusing on the other side, on my First Amendment rights to express myself. And I should not be forced into expressing myself by making a cake for anyone who's doing something that I object to.
You're not expressing yourself. The couple is expressing itself by getting married. You're just being hired to supply an item for the wedding.
Right. And again, we would defend, and not to put too fine a point on it, we would defend your right not to have to write a certain kind of a message on a cake or draw a swastika on a cake or something like that, if that's what it's going to get down to. But if it's just a matter of baking a cake and you sell cakes for weddings, you got to sell to everybody. That's all.
Yeah. But that is the argument. So, oral arguments in the Supreme Court on December 5th.
All right. Do you have some more federal stuff?
Yeah, well, first of all, just really out of nowhere, Rex Tillerson issued a statement of support for Trans Day of Remembrance.
Well, he's been silent about a lot of the oppression of our people around the world, more about which later. And of course, there's also the whole Roy Moore case. Very disheartening to see that race tighten again, at least in the polls.
Well, I'm not surprised. His supporters are blaming gay terrorists for...
Exactly. I mean, his wife last week, when specifically, I mean, they're sophisticated about this. They talk about the Human Rights Campaign and transgenders in the military and transgenders in schools. This is how they're revving up their base. This is what they keep talking about, as if they're the ones who have the morality. He even says that. Well,
meanwhile, on that note, in Ohio, a state representative, Wes Goodman, has resigned his seat. He's someone who described himself as Christian, American, conservative, and Republican.
We all bring our own struggles and our own trials into public life. That's been true for me, and I sincerely regret my actions. Goodbye.
Sex with men in his office.
Unbelievable. Better news from Ohio. The Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services there unveiled a new anti-bullying campaign that will focus on at-risk LGBTQ youth. And in Oregon, a trans teen is suing after the school refused him access to the boys' facilities. The Dallas, Oregon School District refused to allow Elliot Yoder to use the boys' restroom and locker rooms. Why are you so mean?
And catching up, some of this is news we're catching up on from not just this week, but last week, because we did our special roundtable show for Thanksgiving. But we haven't really talked in detail about what happened in Oklahoma with a special election there, where Allison Ickley Freeman, a 26-year-old Democrat, an out lesbian, was elected state senator in a special election. She beat a conservative Republican incumbent by 31 votes. She's a wife of another woman, a mother of 3. She's a mental health therapist. And she says she won because she worked hard going around and knocking on doors. It's the same thing Danica Rome did in Virginia.
I know people who tried to do that in New York against Ruben Diaz up in the Bronx, and it didn't happen. More about which later.
Well, I would say that's a little different.
Another thing. Well, of course, Democrats haven't been getting elected too much in Oklahoma lately. But so
congratulations to Allison.
So yes, but what did they do? And I'm sorry, I don't have her name. They gave the party chairmanship to a 25-year-old woman. They just said, okay, you do it. Well, and she has been doing a fantastic job because she's trying to win.
Youth.
Not just youth, but enthusiasm and
energy
and perhaps naive belief in some cases to win. But they are winning some of these races.
Yes. But that is I do think a lot of it has to do with youth and less cynicism and energy to go out and be ambitious, to work hard to get these things done. We're not going to win them all like that, but that's the only way we're going to win is with that kind of energy. And
I mentioned that one guy was out in the Trump administration, and that's the Reverend Jamie Johnson. He was appointed to the Homeland Security Department to run the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships back in April. And he's out because they CNN dug up his radio tapes where he said things like against black people and Muslims, including a lot of black people being anti-Semitic. He said, he was asked why Jews have done better than blacks, and he said it's an indictment of America's black community that has turned America's major cities into slums because of laziness, drug use, and sexual promiscuity. So at least that was enough to get somebody fired.
Well, maybe this week.
Okay.
All right. In Palmdale, California, the man who murdered his girlfriend's son, Gabriel Fernandez, the 8-year-old, tortured him relentlessly because he thought he was gay.
8 years old.
8 years old. He was convicted of torturing and murdering.
And the mother is going to be tried now.
Yeah. And the social workers are going to be tried too, because the teacher, Gabriel's teacher, he'd come to school totally bruised and marked, and the teacher reported this to the social workers, and the social workers did not take him out of the home, and so they're going to be prosecuted too.
A couple of stories from New York. We learned this week that the New York State Senate, the Democrats are in the midst of a deal to let the traitorous Democrats who've been caucusing with Republicans caucus with the Democrats, but get equal power with them. I think it's a terrible deal. We are led by a feckless governor, Andrew Cuomo, who is not willing to, stand up and lead the party and make it a progressive party.
Well, these independent Democrats, so-called, it doesn't matter whether they, manipulate the Republicans or the Democrats, they're still going to be the most powerful because they're willing to blackmail people.
They'll have, yes. This is giving into blackmail. It's going to give them veto power. The main thing they want to, their donors want them to stand up on is against tenants and for every real estate deal in the state, which is where all the money is. Mm-hmm. But it's an outrage. It's a complete outrage. And so the regular Democrats are agreeing, okay, we won't run anybody against you. Just let us have the nice office.
Oh, come on.
Just let us have the nice office.
We have to run people against them.
Well, that was the deal.
Also in New York, we found that the new report, the New York Police Department is inadequately trained and monitored in their treatment of LGBT people. This does not come as a headline to most of us.
And our Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, who may be the only one to save us from the Trump people, because Trump will likely pardon his crime family and everybody else connected to him, but he can only do that for federal crimes. So the New York State Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, is trying to get them on New York State crimes that Trump can't pardon them on. But he also this week settled a lawsuit with Oswego County upstate, after it agreed to offer trans-inclusive health care coverage. I mean, again, we do have a policy in New York, not a law, a policy in New York that this be done, and that was done by the governor of New York because he can't get things through the legislature. But it's a long story. Anyway, that's progress.
And a little progress in Pennsylvania. We had been concerned because the state legislature was passing bills to reinstate the child health insurance program, but they were adding anti-trans portions to this, and that has been stripped from the bill by the House committee. So we're safe for a minute on that one.
In Minnesota, a state lawmaker is under fire for a tweet. We told you about Andrea Jenkins and another guy getting elected. Transgender people getting elected to the Minnesota City Council.
Minneapolis City Council.
Minneapolis. State Representative Mary Franson tweeted, "A guy who thinks he's a girl is still a guy with a mental health condition." The tweet has since been deleted.
A trans woman in Massachusetts is suing the state for putting her in a male prison where she was, surprise, harassed and attacked.
Right.
And in Oklahoma, we mentioned this during the roundtable last week, a jury says that Southeast Oklahoma State University was wrong to fire in 2011 a trans professor, Rachel Tudor, that they violated the Title VII sex discrimination prohibition by doing so, and they awarded her $1.165 million.
And since we've last been with you, again, we had that panel last week, Jeffrey Tambor has left Transparent after harassment claims. He claims also that he doesn't think he did it, but he's gone.
Well, that raises the whole question, which is a longer conversation about men's consciousness about how they appear to women when they are coming onto them or behaving this way around them. And I think some of them are inappropriately oblivious, but I think they don't understand the power they are exerting, especially when they are large men and they are, imposing themselves in women's space.
I mean, I'm a gay man myself, and gay men can be bad too. But I was also a caddy.
We'll get to that.
I was also a caddy, and the way most men talked about women casually. I mean, these were married men, pillars of the community, and everything, and it was appalling. I was just glad my father didn't talk that way. Thank goodness. But most men did.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Grindr is expanding its trans and non-binary gender options in its app.
Hey, before I forget, mark down January 20th, 2018 on your calendar. That's the next day for the next international massive women's march around the world.
So we're going to do it again.
We're going to do it again on January 20th this time. It was on the day after the inauguration. It'll be on the anniversary of the inauguration of that monster. And we're not partisan here, but that's what he is.
Kind of. And a new book has been published that sounds obnoxious. This guy has written a book called Mostly Straight.
Oh, yes.
Sexual Fluidity Among Men. This book is meant to help men who think, and I quote, bisexual is too gay. So now they want you to be able to say, well, I'm mostly straight, but a little attraction, a little dabbling.
Call me by your name. More about which later.
It's annoying. And a better book, in fact, a winner of the National Book Award for Nonfiction. Congratulations to Masha Gessen. Her new Putin book, The Future is History, How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia, all about the rise of Putin, and I've been very happy to see her making the rounds and getting the acclaim she richly deserves. Congratulations, Masha, on the National Book Award.
And I'm happy to see in San Jose that there's a big gay rights attorney out there who's filed a federal lawsuit against the San Jose Police Department over undercover lewd conduct stings.
Yes.
His attorney Bruce Nickerson. He's seeking damages of $1 million for 5 of the 6 defendants who were cleared. Because what the cops do, and this happened in Penn Station, because I was a visible gay activist. I would hear from these people. They would just call me on the phone, strangers, and they would say, I walked into Penn Station to take a leak. I'm effeminate, I look, I would be picked out as gay. And I just got grabbed by the police, and they, knew they could get a conviction on me because who's not going to believe I'm not gay, but I wasn't doing anything. So that's
just using the bathroom.
That's
in Penn
the kind of
Station.
stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
Lil Peep has died, who had come out as bisexual, the pop music star, 21 years old.
And one of a former gay cable network cameraman, John Heese.
Yes.
We heard about this a couple
He worked
of
with us for many years at the gay cable network, one of Lou Miletta's minions, and was a great, sweet guy, went around the country with us when we covered the conventions and all that kind of stuff, and will be sorely missed. Okay. And, it's been 39 years since Harvey Milk was assassinated. Yeah. 39 years.
1978.
And we also lost an LGBT advocate in San Diego, Ben Dillingham, 72, believed to be the first openly gay elected official in San Diego, and a big advocate in the fight against AIDS as well. Okay.
International news.
Oh, Canada.
Yes. Yes, oh, Canada. Well, they've been working up to this for a while, and there have been lawsuits, and none of this comes out of the blue. Demands for apologies for all the thousands of people who lost their jobs over the years, were prosecuted, just harassed and mistreated.
People ended up committing suicide.
I was just going to say that.
Yes.
So Canada has been figuring out how to apologize, and Prime Minister Trudeau stood up in the Parliament this week and spoke for half an hour eloquently, apologizing for the country's discrimination.
And tearfully.
Yeah. We were wrong. We are sorry. We will never let this happen again. You are loved, and we support you. And he went into great detail about the wrongs that had been committed. He went into great detail naming all of us. You can see it online, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's speech to the Parliament apologizing to LGBTQ and Two-Spirited.
And he marches in a bunch of pride parades. We can't even get our guy to keep doing a pride celebration, but I don't think anybody would want to go.
Now, they also, oh no, God no. But it would be nice if the Congress apologized or something. There has been a class action suit on these cases, and they reached a settlement of that for, I get, 145 million Canadian dollars, which is
100 million of ours,
yeah.
And they are putting aside $250,000 towards community projects to combat homophobia and provide support for people in crisis. Well, that's not very much.
Now, people are, of course, happy that this happened, but they're not ecstatic.
But.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they still have a law on the books that basically says if you have anal intercourse and you're not 18 and you're not alone with the other person, and it's not, you can be prosecuted for this. And now I believe the courts have said that this is unconstitutional, but they haven't wiped it off the books.
Well, the same as with sodomy laws in this country. It's been illegal for quite some time now, and yet people are still getting arrested.
They've had 165 people had charges filed against them in the last, from 2013 to 2015, with 7 convictions.
And they still have laws about HIV positive people being sexually active and disclosure mandates and all that kind of stuff. So it is not a paradise, but this apology and settlement is a step forward, but there is more work to be done.
Yes.
All right. In other international news...
Well, that horrifying thing that happened in Russia, a man threw acid at LGBTQ advocates who were leaving a conference on LGBT families.
Well, a report says that anti-LGBT hate crimes, especially murder, have doubled in the 5 years since they passed that no promo homo law. And the Russian LGBT network says attackers have become more aggressive and less fearful.
Well, it's all about the government generally identifies the scapegoat, and we're going to talk about that with other countries here. I mean, it's usually countries that are faltering, like the Putin regime and the Egyptian regime and all these other regimes, and they just pick us out and say, well, everybody hates them, so let's go after them.
And FIFA, the International Soccer Federation, has issued a formal warning to spectators who are planning to attend the World Cup, which is being held in Russia next year, and said there's going to be a lot of homophobia, there's going to be a lot of racism. You want to watch out if you're planning to go to the World Cup in Russia.
And let's talk about what happened in Egypt. We've been telling you about the ongoing persecution. So the 16 men who were arrested last month during a crackdown, and this was because, you know, somebody waved a rainbow flag at a concert where there was a gay band playing. A court
from Lebanon.
A court in Cairo found 14 of them guilty of inciting debauchery and abnormal sexual relations. Because remember, they don't have an anti-sodomy law, and they've been freed on bail, but they face
3 years in prison.
Right.
They are out on bail pending appeal, but Egypt is not playing on this. They are aggressively arresting and prosecuting people.
At least 75 people since that incident have been arrested, so this is their new thing.
In Pakistan, in Peshawar, there have been 2 recent murders of trans women, one a couple of weeks ago, one this week, murdered in broad daylight in a downtown market area. Bad.
And Turkey has this new extended crackdown. Now,
yeah.
I have a friend who lives in Iraq, and he goes to Turkey to blow off steam and get a little bit more amenable environment. But Turkey has banned LGBT cinema, theater, panels, interviews, exhibitions. Why? Because it endangers health and morality. Because such functions are likely to provoke reactions within certain segments of society and are also at risk of being targeted by terrorists. So we have to ban them. This is what they've done.
And again, Turkey, like Egypt, has no law against homosexuality. They're just finding different phrases to use to crack down. And it also reminds me of many years ago when Golda Meir was the prime minister of Israel, and rape was a problem, and instituted a curfew for men. And she was asked, but, don't you want to protect the women? Shouldn't they be told to stay home? And she said, it's the men who are the rapists.
God. Wow.
And yet it is the gay people who they claim are going to be attacked. So let's lock them up.
We're a nuisance.
Yeah.
Well, better news from Chile, where 100,000 people marched for marriage equality. The president there, Michelle Bachelet, supports moving along with these laws, although
there has been
time.
a bill introduced in the Chile parliament to legalize same-sex marriage.
I like the name of the Chilean group.
The Congress.
The Chilean LGBT group is called the Movement for Homosexual Integration and Liberation.
Excellent.
Nice.
And I think we're pretty happy that Mugabe has lost power and resigned in Zimbabwe.
How do we like the new guy?
Probably not much.
I think he's from his party.
Yeah.
Although they jailed a lot of his allies.
His vice president was jailed.
And maybe the wife.
Maybe. But Mugabe,
she's a piece of work.
Mugabe liked to call us dogs and pigs.
Thank God.
And that was on a good day.
And in Ghana, they had an historic LGBTQ march. They called it the Peace Walk. And they were thanking the president of Ghana for his recent interview with Al Jazeera, where he hinted that the country would address pro-equality laws if there was a strong current of opinion. Well, I wouldn't hold my breath, but...
Well, they hold the march to try to create the strong current of opinion.
No. And then Hong Kong had their annual LGBTQ Pride March, and they're going to be hosting the Gay Games. And they had 1 million people in Brazil for their year.
Well, here, this is Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands marching in Hong Kong. Things are a little dicey in Hong Kong because they have been awarded the Gay Games, I guess, in 2022. And the government is lukewarm at best about this, so LGBT activists in Hong Kong are really not happy about that. And the government has also announced that it is appealing the recent court decision that upheld rights for a lesbian couple. So things are controversial in Hong Kong.
And things are controversial in Bermuda. The Minister of Home Affairs there, a guy named Walton Brown, he's being criticized because he wants to move back to having just domestic partnerships, not marriage, and he put a bill on the table there.
Well, the court
to do it.
Mandated same-sex marriage, and same-sex couples are getting married in Bermuda.
Right. So I think our side would sue if he does this, but he's trying to shove this through the legislature.
They've tried before. I'd like to think the court will stand strong and that will prevail, but it's a continuing fight. In Nepal, they say the first trans woman and male partner have registered a marriage. We have a picture of them.
There they are.
The happy couple. But things have always...
Their marriage is being entered into soberly. They say that at the service sometimes.
Okay.
All right.
And we told you we'd get to gays acting badly. Well, it turns out there is a gay male couple from San Diego who travel around the world. They call themselves the Traveling Butts. And their big thing is they go to various places and they get themselves photographed with their rear ends naked.
They're mooning everybody.
And they did this in a temple in Thailand. And
now,
surprise,
we're not against protests in churches, are we?
Certainly not. But we also believe one should be aware of the consequences one is going to face.
Yes.
And they have been arrested. And they are going to face some serious charges for posting pictures of their naked rear ends in a temple in Thailand.
Stupid. All right. Horrible story out of Tenerife, off the coast of Spain there. 22 people were injured as a gay club. The floor collapsed. 22 people were injured. 2 believed to be in serious condition there. It just collapsed.
In Estonia, a female couple, one Estonian, one American, are fighting for recognition of their U.S. marriage. This is how many countries have ended up legalizing same-sex marriage.
A little note from New Zealand, which amused me. On his Asia trip, Trump took a dig at the new prime minister there for becoming the country's head of state while leading a party that did not win a majority. And Jacinda Ardern, who is the prime minister, said, I pointed out to him that no one had marched over my election to office.
All over the world, and planning to do it again. Congratulations to Mark Foster, a British champion swimmer who has come out. There he is.
He's certainly been known. He's 47 years old now. He was an 11-time European champ, 2 Commonwealth gold medals, and 5-time Olympian champ. He said he said, I wish I'd done it when I was 21 when I met my first partner, but I wasn't ready. And one of the things he said was, lately it's because I work with kids and what are people going to say and all this kind of stuff. So this was all holding him back.
Well,
and it turns out one of his roommates was gay and he didn't know it.
Neither one of them talked to each other about it.
They were living together.
Yeah. But he did say something that struck me. I have often said that it is harder for people of higher status to come out because of fear of assuming minority status, that they don't want to give up privilege. They're afraid of being seen as lesser, as being stigmatized because they are of high status. And he said that the reason he didn't come out earlier was fear of feeling vulnerable, which I think is the same thing I'm describing, but is a little different way of saying it that I thought was kind of poignant.
I mean, I felt that a little bit myself in 1973 when I decided to come out.
Yes, exactly.
That was 44 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
I was struck by the way he said it, which I thought was interesting.
Let's see. Oh, by the way, Kevin Spacey is under investigation for 2 rapes in London at this point.
Well, Matt Lauer evidently has quite a long list of transgressions yet to be revealed.
Okay.
All right, are we moving on to AIDS news?
Well, you were congratulating book winners. David France won the most lucrative UK nonfiction prize for How to Survive a Plague.
Yep, best nonfiction book. Won $40,000, the UK Bailey Gifford Prize.
And Trump's pick for Health and Human Services, this guy Alex Azar, is a drug lord. Well, I mean, he's a pharmaceutical executive. That's who he wants to put in charge.
Yes, but now he claims, after propping up drug prices for years, that he thinks drug prices are too high.
Yes, I read that in the New York Times. All right.
Now, but we're, of course, bearing the lead, which is that Friday is World AIDS Day, December 1st. Well, I'm speaking at the gay synagogue here, Congregation Beth Simchat Torah, on Friday evening, if any of you want to drop by.
Around what time?
Well, services start at 6:30. I think I'm speaking at about 7.
Free and open to the public.
Yes, the synagogue is spotlighting women in the epidemic, people who worked in the epidemic over the years. I, at first, was reluctant to accept this very kind invitation because I certainly didn't want to speak for all women who worked in the epidemic. But in fact, they're having various people speak, members of the congregation, et cetera, who've been involved in one way or another. So I appreciate the invitation, and I think it'll be an interesting evening. Visual AIDS has something they're doing on Monday, and there will be various...
There's something down at the AIDS Memorial down in where the old St. Vincent's was,
yes,
that Brent Nicholson Earl is doing.
But it's,
at around 6 o'clock.
Certainly we are far from the end of the epidemic, and we have a lot more to do. I was reading something recently about how terrible it is that the world has not done enough to finance the drugs that could be stopping the epidemic much more quickly around the world if everybody was tested and put on effective, long-lasting treatment. And we're just not making that commitment at the level we should be. And so we're letting this drag on, and we're not helping people.
Oh, and wait till they start cutting all the ADAP programs when all these cuts start coming in.
Absolutely. On the other hand, a little good news from New York City, Department of Health, which says last year, 2016, there were 2,279 new HIV infections diagnosed and reported, which is still far too many, but it is down 8.6% from the previous year. So that is a lot of that is
attributable to the fact that men who have HIV often are most often on the drugs and therefore not transmitting it to their partners, and men going on PrEP.
Yes, but that the business of being on treatment and not being communicable is really, really important. Well, and again, is about getting people tested and treated.
I mean, the big goal a couple of years ago was to end AIDS by 2020 in New York and in America, basically, but I don't know if we're going to get there.
I was also at the TAG Awards, the Treatment Action Group Awards, a couple of weeks ago at this point, and Charles King of Housing Works, former colleague, fellow arrestee at St. Patrick's, was talking. He's working with the governor now on this program, and he talked a little about the new commitment from New York State to provide the resources necessary to end the epidemic, which is the goal.
The sad thing about all this is, all right, you know, we can have AIDS programs, but if they cut everything else, housing subsidies, you know, benefits, anything that people rely on, and they end up on the streets, it's all going to go to hell.
Well, that was the whole point of Housing Works in the first place, was to provide that kind of support and get beyond just the drugs to some real needs of poor people living with HIV.
All right.
Entertainment news?
Well, you know, the hot new movie, and we haven't seen it, is Call Me By Your Name, which, as you said, just won the Gotham Award, and, you know, is up for Oscars, going to be up for Oscars likely, although, it's controversial. It's got a screenplay by James Ivory, and, you know, it stars Armie Hammer and this kid, Timothy Chalamet, who was being touted for Best Actor.
Well, tell them the story.
Well, it takes place in 1983 in Italy. An American family is there, a father and his son, and a graduate student comes in, Armie Hammer, and it's the lush life in in Italy at a villa, but the two men fall in love, and that's what it's about.
The grad student and the son.
So.
The son is 17, I think.
Yes, and the other guy is 24. Chris Cooper, we'll give you his review in our email this week. He says the chemistry soon overrides caution. It would all be a bit too much an intellectual's ultimate gay coming-of-age fantasy, if not for the natural flow of the romance and the heartfelt performances. And so, I would say I still want to see it, but people are arguing about it.
Well, why are they arguing?
They're arguing because they're saying, why is this the centerpiece gay film? These guys are also going out with women in the thing, and it's not billed as a bi thing, it's billed as the ultimate gay romance kind of a thing. So we'll see. I'll have to see when I see it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but it also sounds a little too precious.
Chris says God's Own Country, the other movie, it's a British movie, I believe, is a better gay romance.
I still like Moonlight.
Yeah, sure.
But I haven't seen these films, so we'll see.
And I heard that sex scenes were cut out of this, basically.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Well, at least homosexual sex scenes.
Okay. I want to congratulate a former Gay USA guest, the out lesbian director Dee Reese, whose new film Mudbound is getting ecstatic reviews, available in theaters and on Netflix.
Oh, right.
So I want to take a look at that.
Yes, absolutely.
Soon.
I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I saw it is absolute homosexual heaven there at this point. I mean, the two.
Isn't it usually?
No, because under Philippe de Montebello, the former guy, even when they opened the Greek and Roman galleries, they de-gayed it. You'd be looking at guys screwing on the side of an urn, and there was no reference to it. It was just like, oh, what's that? Seriously. I mean, this was a whole big problem with
Yes,
him.
I remember the big fight over labeling.
So. The two big exhibits are Michelangelo, Divine Draftsman and Designer, and the David Hockney exhibit. And I'm going to put up two pictures here. One is of a Michelangelo sketch of Roman that he did for Roman soldiers. We have that. That's that one. I show you this for a reason. Take a good look.
Don't show it in Thailand.
Not in the temple. And the other one is from the David Hockney exhibit, which is a thing he did of his lover, Peter Schlesinger.
I detect a theme.
Bare-assed on the bed. Well, those are. I mean, what I'm saying is, look. I mean, and the other picture is, of course, of Michelangelo's lover, who was going to get his name right here, Andrea Quaratisi, and this is one of the centerpieces of the exhibit. Now, the problem with the Michelangelo exhibit is that it's sketches, so this isn't a very large, and it's so crowded, and it's kind of hard to get a real good look at. And I think the Hockney will be as well. I went to a preview, so it wasn't. But those are bigger canvases, and it's the big, bright Hockney canvases. But I'm so impressed with Hockney from a very early age. In the late 50s, early 60s, he is doing explicitly gay stuff.
Fearless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course there are a lot of gay people in his things, and just unapologetic. He lived his whole life that way. He's still alive. He's about 80 now. And so
there was an excellent documentary about him that ran recently, PBS.
So the Michelangelo is open till February 12th and the Hockney until February 25th, and they're unmissable. Okay. As is Harry Clark. I mean, the show I saw with Billy Crudup at the Vineyard Theater. And it sounds like kind of an odd show. It's about a Midwestern kid, right, who speaks with a British accent. His father's going, "Why are you talking that way?" He says, "Well, it's just the way I speak, father." It's like, so that's his character. But then he comes to New York with this British accent. It's just the way he talks, and he sort of insinuates himself into the lives of other people. So it's actually hilarious. He plays all the characters. It's a one-man show, and then it gets kind of dark, and it was just entrancing. It was just so interesting and surprising all the way through. So Billy Crudup at the Vineyard Theater. They've extended it through later in December, so check that out.
Did he pick it up from watching old British movies or something?
Well, it's written by somebody else. What do you mean? Did he?
No, his British accent as a child.
He doesn't explain. He just says, "This is the way I speak." Of course, he doesn't just speak. He has a posh accent, but Harry Clark is a bit of a Cockney. He talks like this. And there's a gay thing going on. I don't want to spoil it for you. I want you to see it if you can get a ticket.
Yeah, we have other theatrical experiences to spoil for you.
By the way, I had a friend in college who was from Winchester, Virginia, who was from a farm, and that's the way he spoke. I don't know. We didn't know why he did it. He did it.
We must learn to have conversations about these things so we know.
All right.
How about Latino history for morons?
Oh, I was going to say, I laughed more in the first 10 minutes of The Band's Visit, the new musical, which is pretty wonderful, than I did for the entire John Leguizamo show. There were a lot of people laughing around us.
There were. We're not ready to talk about The Band's Visit yet.
Yeah, that's The Band's Visit.
Yeah, take that picture down.
Yeah.
First, we want to deal with Latino history for morons. I had not seen any previous John Leguizamo Broadway plays. Yeah, I'd been wanting to see him on Broadway, so I was happy to have this available. But I sat there pretty stony-faced through the thing.
I mean, it's a noble idea that he's going to teach his son about Latinx heroes and things like that. But I mean, he's so. And I don't object to certain things, but I mean, it's kind of vulgar in a nasty kind of a way. And he does women stereotypes, gay stereotypes, Jewish stereotypes, and we're all supposed to laugh. And he says, hey, I got a gay brother. Leave me alone.
I realized at some point in the middle of this that every character other than him had a lisp. The son had a lisp. All these other stereotypes had a lisp. Every one of them.
But a lot of people did have a good time around us.
We
acknowledge
which is more than we can say, I think, for Home for the Holidays.
I wasn't even going to talk about it.
Oh no, we saw it. We have to mention it.
Okay.
All these American Idol, The Voice, something else, winners singing Christmas carols. I'm a sucker for Christmas carols.
I'm an atheist and I like Christmas music, but they butchered it.
So we thought we will go see this. Oh my God! I thought I was at a Joel Osteen.
Plus a gratuitous appearance by Danny Aiello as the narrator, telling us about his impoverished childhood at Christmas in Washington Heights.
Awful.
Oh, boy.
I wanted to run home and listen to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
I had the exact, Ann and I was saying, kept having these exact same thoughts as she was. All right, so the band.
That's how cliched it was. It provoked cliched, similar thoughts.
All right.
Okay.
The Band's Visit is the big hit show on Broadway now. Tony, it's based on a movie that you saw the other day.
I watched the movie on TV. It's available on cable, The Band's Visit. It's quite charming.
Now, it's a musical with Tony Shalhoub he's an Egyptian band leader, and they go to the wrong town in the desert of Israel. That's the setup. And this is the woman, played by Katrina Lenk, who he engages with. Let's just put it that way. As I said, it was really funny in the beginning. It was just so dry and subtle and everything. The music reminded me a lot of the Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Very romantic and all that kind of stuff.
There was some of that in the movie, too.
But, it's a very sweet show, and we recommend it.
And I saw a movie that's playing now in New York and is going to open in L.A., Naples 44, which is an interesting pastiche of documentary footage, movie clips, all about Naples right at the end of the Second World War, and narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch, reading diaries of a British officer.
And congratulations to David Drake, our friend, the new artistic director of the Provincetown Playhouse.
Provincetown Playhouse or Provincetown Theater?
Theater.
Okay.
In Provincetown.
Enough. More next week. See you then.
Bye.